Good evening, everyone. You're in the right spot. Good evening. I'd like to get started, please. If you could find your seats, that would be great. Okay, good evening and thank you. I'd like to welcome you all to our special council meeting. It's nice to see so many people here for our budget deliberations. I think this is a record for us, so that's great. As we call tonight's meeting to order, I would like to recognize the traditional territory of the Sauk Nation upon which our municipality resides, also recognizing their long history and their connection to these lands. So, Council, we do have an agenda before us here, pretty straightforward, so I'll look for motion of approval of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Berger and seconded by Councillor Loggins. Questions on the agenda? No. Okay. All right. All those in favor of the agenda? Opposed? Motion's carried. So we do have a public question and comment period, and then we also have, as we continue into our budget part. So at this point, I can invite anyone forward on anything of the budget actually as a whole, if you would like to speak to that at this time. And then as we get into the budget sections, we'll add in some additional, what we have been doing is adding in additional time for comments or questions on the sections. I think we've made our way through most of it. Our CAO is going to give us an overview again on the capital projects, and then any other questions that Council may have on the budget as a whole we can take at that time. And of course, anyone that has questions at that. And then seeing on how tonight goes, then on Thursday we do have another special meeting planned where we would look to do first and second reading on the budget bylaw at that point. And then there would be another public session available on the coming Monday, I believe. Or not on the 16th, but on the 16th? The regular meeting that would follow. Or actually, sorry, Monday is the 9th, so we would be at that particular day. I'm jumping ahead a week. Okay, so on that long-winded comment, I would like to invite anyone forward for any comments on the agenda, because that's really all we have on tonight's agenda. So I would require, as usual, your name and address for the record, and if you could let us know which section of the budget you are speaking to, that would be appreciated. Speaking as a member of the public?
Yeah. No, I have a question for you.
Question from Councillor Parkinson. Go ahead.
I just have a question for you because I would like to request that Council reconsider the motion to remove the CRD Arts from the budget.
To remove it from the budget?
That was removed, to put it back in. So to discuss it, the removal of the CRD Arts from the budget process.
Okay, so that would be a reconsideration motion. So you could put forward, after the public question and comment period, a motion that Council reconsider. And if the reconsideration motion passes, then we can rediscuss the arts funding. But if the reconsideration motion does not pass, then no, you can't discuss the arts. It's only about reconsideration.
Correct.
Okay? So I'll start with the public question and comment. If there's anything on that, please come forward and, as stated, name, address for the record. Thank you. Sorry, if you could please just turn on the microphone. There's just the...
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. Krista Brennan, much better name now. I'm here, as are a number of people, I think, in the room tonight, with some concern about the budget piece that was removed at the last budget meeting about funding the CRD Arts grant. And I may not have the term right there. I've just walked. I'm a bit out of breath. But I think there are a lot of people here who recognize all the things that are related to the soft parts of arts and how it's great for our community, for health and wellness, and for all those things. But I would like to mention something that is sometimes overlooked. And basically, 2 weeks ago, the Stats Can brought out their data collected from 2016, which is the science, if you will, linking arts and culture and economy. And I thought it would be a good reference point for here this evening, and I'll try to be brief. The gross domestic product, the GDP impact of culture industries in BC is $7.8 billion. It's larger than the value of agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting, which is $4.3 billion. Utilities is $5.8 billion. Accommodation of food services is $7.1 billion. Mining, quarrying, and oil and gas are $7.6 billion. Arts and culture is $7.8 billion. And it's the science that talks about when you bring arts and culture to a community, you're bringing arts and culture tourism, you're strengthening your local area, you're bringing spending to your area and higher profile. Linking to the CRD program would benefit us by allowing us to tap into regional tourism advertising, marketing, and initiatives. It would allow us to be part of tours. I'm shortening it up. Okay, quick. SRT AGM is fighting for money and seeing how they can do. In short, investment in the arts from the Sauk Fine Arts perspective is an investment in our community and economy. Any funding that you would get from the CRD would go directly into the economy. We're a non-profit, and all it would do is revitalize. Sauk Fine Arts themselves has a $600,000 local boost to the economy, and think what that would do if we had those kind of monies for available to the Phil, to all the other arts and cultural groups in Sauk. So I'm just saying an investment in arts and tourism is an investment in this community. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Okay, can we just leave the clapping? Please, I like to keep it neutral so that it doesn't dissuade anyone from speaking. Thank you. Other speakers, please.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. My name is Diana Jack. I'm a member of the board of the Sauk Philharmonic Orchestra. I understand that we are ineligible as an organization to apply for any grant assistance from the CRD because the District of Sauk is a non-participating municipality. I also understand that there was a presentation made to Council on January 22nd, and in that presentation it was outlined the options for the district, and that it was going to be taken under consideration. I'll just say briefly tonight that under the revised policy for the community grant program here through the district, we have a 3-year consecutive maximum. So the Sauk Philharmonic was applying this year. It marks the 2nd year. So 1 more year, and then we have to take a year's break. So the CRD is at the present time closed off to us as a potential funding source. There's also a maximum of $7,000 to be awarded through the District of Sauk. I think that the opportunity for considerably more than that would be available through the CRD. And I think that Sauk is growing very quickly, and there's increasing pressure put on the municipality for funding to the arts and other organizations. And our participation, I think, would pay back in spades. And I think the time is now ripe for Sauk to become, we're the only non-participating municipality, with the exception of Sydney, who belong on a donation process, which is open to us as well, I understand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jack. Other speakers? And just like to remind everyone, with the public input, even in a special meeting, there is a 2-minute time limit. That's why I'm sort of cutting people off. I don't mean to be rude, but we also need to get through the agenda as well. There's just a button on the base of the microphone. Thank you.
I'm Linda Gordon. I'm president of the Sault Community Arts Council. We're operational. We do ongoing events throughout the season, and the only way we can do these free to the public without charging money is by having grants and doing fundraising. Having the District of Sault be our 50% of our grant, other than the BC Arts Council, if we do join the CRD, it will allow us to tap into the CRD pot, which is a considerable amount of money, and we'll have the same share or the same. We won't be, because we're a small community, it's not like we get a small amount. We get the same amount as Victoria participants do. The Colin Plant came out and did a presentation to us, and I find that it would be a really good thing to be able to tap into that large pot of money that the District of Sault just doesn't have that amount of money. So for a small contribution, it would open the doors to the community, not just for the arts, but for all the cultural groups that put on a lot of events in the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gordon. Other speakers on tonight's budget?
Herb Haldane, 3118C, Otter Point Road. I'm in favor of the arts receiving a bunch of this funding, but I'm not necessarily in favor of the funding model. I think if Sault taxpayers are going to put $5 per 100,000 investment in something, why don't we control it ourselves? Why don't we? I did the math when I was at home, just roughly, and you were looking at over $100,000 a year that we're going to be sending into Victoria to CRD, and then we're going to be asking for portions of it back. If we control that money ourselves, then we get to ask for it from our own council and put it in our own funds. So if you're asking for money from all the taxpayer per $100,000 of your tax assessment, why can't we keep that in-house and put that on a line item in our own budget and give it for our own stuff?
Okay, Mr. Haldane, I'll just clarify that the amount for Sault's requisition is about $33,000. There's two different models that in how different municipalities can contribute, and I think it was around 32,000.
I read that it was on tax assessment as well, but if that's not the case, then
no, it's 32,000.
Okay. So if with that funding model in place, would we not be better off? Because you have to pay an administration fee to CRD to even handle that money. They do that with us with CPARC. So CPARC the CRD takes a big chunk of money out of CPARC, over $100,000 a year there, from what I understand, in order to administrate our local hockey and swimming, which we basically do with our own employees and on our own. There shouldn't be a CRD portion leaving our community, is my point. And I'm worried that that's what might happen with this arts money. It'll get tied in with all the stuff downtown Victoria, and they'll use it all up, rather than putting it out to our own people here. I don't know everything about it, and I don't know how far that will go, but I just think if we use our local money locally, that might pay bigger dividends, that's all. But
okay.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Mr. Haldane. Other speakers this evening?
Sheila Wallace, 2420 Dixon Road. And I'm just speaking on behalf of the board of the Sault Community Choir. I represent 60 singers, our artistic director and accompanist. The audiences that come to our concerts each year, 2 seasons, we put on 6 concerts in Sault. And also attend a number of different functions, singing at the request of the community, free of charge. We, in addition to somebody else that mentioned, have used up our Sault grant requests over the last 3 years. Each year we need to use new sheet music, we need equipment, costumes, paying various people to do various things for us in order to in order to put on our concerts. So we just wanted to lend our voices to support this CRD funding proposal. And I don't understand all the mechanics of it, but I know that SUC at this point has limited capacity to support the kinds of productions that we are working on presenting here and outside our community. So I just wanted to make that presentation on behalf of our choir.
Thank you, Ms. Wallace. Other speakers on tonight's budget?
Is it just this button here at the bottom? It's on. Okay, hi, my name is Gregory Verano. I'm a resident here in Souk, and I'm also part of the Souk Community Arts Council. And I'm not here to talk about numbers so much, but the importance of art in our culture, and it's part of our identity. And we're talking about $32,000 here, which breaks down to about $8.50 a day, to enrich our culture, to empower our youth, to give them a sense and a path to express themselves, along with residents of Souk. This is a great opportunity for us to be part of a group, a collective of municipalities and districts. And the one thing I know from moving here from the biggest metropolis in Canada, Toronto, we feel isolated here. A lot of people in Souk feel that we don't belong with Victoria. We're too far. We're not connected. And this is a great opportunity to be connected for like $8.50 a day to enrich our culture, enrich our region, and people come to Souk for the Souk Fine Art Show from all over. And why should it be one show? Why can't they come here every weekend? Every week. We are part of this CRD. And this is a great opportunity to incorporate ourselves. And I'm getting emotional because I made my living as an artist. And it's being attacked from, every direction. It's all about money, money, money. Some things you can't put a price on. And that is the arts. Where would we be today without the arts? It's a reflection of who we are, our history, where we come from. And we're putting a price tag on it. $8.50 a day. That's all I have to say. I want you all to think about that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You hold on the clapping, but when you're outside, fill your boots. Thank you. Other speakers this evening on tonight's budget? Okay, and there will be an opportunity as we get the overview on the presentations from our CAO. There will be another opportunity for comment there as well. And then also, again, as we go through the budget, even that on Thursday special meeting, there will be public input as well as when we actually look at it on Monday again. Okay, so Councillor Parkinson, would you like to make your motion?
I would move that Council reconsider its motion to remove the CRD Arts from the budget process.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so that's been moved and seconded by Councillor Pearson. Speaking to it, Councillor Parkinson.
So, as was...
Just if I may, remember you can speak only about reconsidering it, not about the actual service and all that. That'll come should the reconsideration motion pass. It's on reconsidering and why we should reconsider. That is...
So,
okay.
Okay, so it's my opinion that we should reconsider the motion that was to remove the funding from the budget because we should be looking at the request in comparison to other CRD functions that we as the district belong to. We belong to the parks. We belong CRD parks. We belong to the CRD regional housing. We belong to all sorts of different committees there, but the arts does not belong. The arts would be the least amount of money that we have to put in to belong to something. For the CRD Arts, it works out to be $5 per person, per household, to belong to this at the $32,000. Right now, we pay $146 per person for Sea Park. We just gave $700,000 to have a turf field put into Souk. I believe that this is a small sum of money for the benefit of our community. There are so many art groups that could be receiving larger amounts of money. We set our limit at $7,000. A number of our groups will no longer be able to get funding from us. Where are they going to go to match their grants? The provincial government, for the Arts Council, for example, whatever we give them, the province matches. So if we give them $7,000, the province gives them $7,000. So now we have $14,000 for our community. Without giving them anything, we get nothing from anybody. So there's nothing for the people of Souk for any of the arts. There are so many children's groups, new groups that came into being, such as the Harmonies Project, where you have members of the Souk Philharmonic after school practicing and teaching students how to play instruments from a very young age. They come out here for our events, for the Mayor's New Year's Levy, to be able to perform for us and for our enjoyment. And we have the Amber Academy, which is all for the youth to learn in 5 different categories. They learn about dance, they learn about music, they sing in choirs, they dance, they do all sorts of things. There's so much to say. There's so much benefit to belonging to this arts group. I know, for an example, Machosen. I'm reconsidering this. Machosen.
Councillor Parkinson.
Machosen gives
we can debate the service.
$12,000.
Should the motion pass.
And they get that in return. I just want to say that
Councillor
other
Parkinson,
municipalities get that in return.
Yes.
Thank you.
I appreciate it's just, I know there's passion there. It's just from a practical rules of order, it's why we should reconsider.
And that's why we should.
Okay, well, that's good.
That's exactly why we should.
Okay, Councillor Pearson.
Well, I think, and I'll speak to reconsidering the motion.
That's all you can speak to.
Exactly. When you sever off a presentation that gets into a budget, you forget about the presentation. Councillor Parkinson and I happened to be at that presentation, and as you just heard, some passion that flows forward. There was a very robust presentation in January, and that's why I voted to consider it then, and I voted last time to consider it again. And I'm happy that Councillor Parkinson has brought this forward again for us to reconsider. It's well worth looking at the entire presentation to make a decision. We look at spreadsheets in the budget process without the presentation, and it's easy sometimes to look at a line item and start recommending cuts to the budget because we're all looking at money. This one has a lot more connected to it than just simply money. And I ask my fellow councillors to reconsider the motion. I will be supporting it again tonight.
Thank you, Councillor. On reconsideration, Councillor Berger.
Yes, thank you. For me, I'm torn with this, and I'm not torn with it because I don't wholeheartedly support the arts. My grandmother's a fine arts show winner. So where I struggle is I struggle with how much will our arts community get out of it. I went back and I looked through all the recipients, and in comparison to what they put in, all of the funds seem to go towards the core. What I'm hearing loud and clear tonight is we need to revisit and redo our own grants application process as well. That needs to be looked at, I think. That's one thing I've heard tonight that needs to be done. Currently, we have $111,937 available in community grants. 111,934. That's available to everybody in Souk, any nonprofit that needs a grant. So I would like us to rework our rules, redo our application process, and make that available. If someone has a really great idea and they need more funds for a community culture project, I think we should make that available. I think we're hindering ourselves right now with supplying funds to our own community groups. I really struggle on a CRD level because we always seem to be forgotten. When we're part of the core group, and I'll use the fellow that spoke from Toronto, about how we're isolated and not connected out here. That's how the CRD board feels. I'd like him to go and talk to the CRD board so we can get some of that funding out this way. We haven't seen much from the CRD housing. We haven't seen much from the other CRD boards that we're all a part of. So my only reservation is I'm uneasy whether we're going to get bang for our buck. I think we have a ton of money here that I would love to give to all of the organizations in Souk. So I wrestle with it. I wrestle with, do we add another group? I mean, we can try it for 2 years. I'm reading right here. If we decide to reconsider and join the program, we're a part of it for 2 years. It's based 50% on BC assessment, 50% on population. We'll be paying 30% of that based on our community size. So it will fluctuate. When we grow, we will be paying more. I don't have an issue trying it for 2 years, but I wrestle with, are we going to get out of it what we need? In going through and looking at the recipients for the last 5 years, I'm telling you, everything goes to the core. $10,000 seems to be the current number, $8,000 for all core municipalities. Metchosin got $1,500 for one. Sydney got $1,100 for one. I just struggle. I want our groups in Souk to do better. I want you to get the funding. So what that tells me is we need to redo our process.
Okay. Councillor Berger, or pardon me, Parkinson, reconsideration.
Reconsidering. I'd just like to say that we shouldn't be prejudging and that we would not receive anything. I would like to state that Metchosin did receive $10,000, and they have every single year for the William Head Theatre Group there. They received it last year, plus they received funding for the Metchosin Art Festival. They normally receive more funding than what they put into it. Maybe not a great deal, but they still receive it. I think that we should join, see how we do, we have such great groups here that could receive more funding to make their programs work longer. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Loggins, reconsideration.
On reconsideration alone, I am willing absolutely to reconsider the motion. I do want us to have a more robust conversation about it. However, I do have some hesitations as well.
Okay, good. So I'm going to call the question on reconsideration, okay?
Sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, one last question on the motion. At the last meeting when we talked about this, we talked about the funding source. Right now it's a 0.5 tax increase to the residents.
We can...
But I think for me it goes hand in hand. If we choose to reconsider, where does the funding come from?
Okay, so should we choose to reconsider, then council has to debate whether or not we support it. And that's when everyone will have the opportunity to ask those questions, get clarity from our staff, and to discuss the pros and cons of joining the service. So that will come after, but we have to decide procedurally if we're going to even reconsider, because if we don't, if it doesn't carry, then it's over, it's done, we're moving on into the rest of the budget. Should council pass reconsideration, then another motion to join or not to join can come forward, and that whole debate can ensue from there. And your question will be answered at that time. Okay, good. All right. So I'm calling the question on reconsideration. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, it's carried unanimously. Council is going to reconsider the motion. So now, before we do that, maybe I can just get, we talked about this before in terms of the funding. So what has been brought forward to us so far has come from staff, obviously, and that is put forward the 2.55% increase that we were expecting from taxes. So if maybe I can just get some clarity to Councillor Berger's point, Mr. Blackhall, on where the funding would come from, what the tax implication is, and so forth.
Thank you, Your Worship. It is the budget that we looked at the other evening started at 2.55. With the changes that were discussed at that meeting, it's now at closer to 2.8. We added line painting, et cetera, the adjustments that were made at that time. If this funding were to, and that's with it coming out, so if we add it back in, it will be approximately 0.5%, right? It could possibly be funded by the SPA reserve if we make a change to that bylaw, so we'll have to just make sure the bylaw would accommodate for that type of It's definitely arts related, but whether, the exact wording in the bylaw allows for it, but that's something council could change if they wanted to before any money was spent. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Blackhall. I'd like to just share a few comments, and then I'll turn to Councillor Parkinson. So I agree in supporting this service through the CRD. As outlined before, it's about $5 per household, as said, and we already contribute $150 into CPark. We also there's 2.5 full-time staff that coordinate and work on this program. It does cover off operating expenses, new and emerging projects. There's an entire public art website. There's new initiatives through the Equity Incubator Fund, community outreach, and the like. So already I have received some queries from folks that want to do different festivals or events in Souk, and they're asking where there may be funding for those. Our grant deadline has already closed. I'm not aware of what other items have come through the province. There is nothing that they could access through the CRD, and that would be to do a local event within our community. So when you look at folks that are trying to do things that sort of go year-round, this would be an option. There's different deadlines for that particular, through the CRD fund, for the different funds. There's different deadlines, but there are several of them. I do believe that arts is an economic driver for our community. When we speak of the impact on household versus impact commercially, we do need to grow the commercial sector. Arts will do that and has done that through the years, so I think that that's another valid reason. When I hear comments that we are lost at the CRD board table, sometimes I agree with that, other times I disagree. It was those other municipalities who felt that we were unrepresented through transit, so they pushed and lobbied the province to have Souk added to that, so I sit on the Transit Commission now. Secondly, when I advocated for healthcare, the CRD board was 23 in favor, 1 opposed to fund regional health services in Souk. That's 40% of capital and operating funds that is already waiting. So when people say, when can we do something, almost half the funding is already there, and that was widely supported. That was by the entire board. We have seen letters of support when the turf field, when CPark put forward the application for the turf field, all mayors of the CRD wrote letters of support for that fund. We didn't get it at that time, but they did all write in support of that. They also fully supported the expansion that CPark is going to have now. They also supported the golf course acquisition, the salmon enhancement project, additional lands being added to the C2C park. All the parks, all the operating funds were under review throughout every municipality within the CRD. There was some discussion about cutting back. You may have heard lifeguards at Thetis Lake did not get funding, but extra backcountry camping and the like in the CRD, all of that went through. Additional staff, additional trail maintenance, all of those things were supported. So I do feel that, sure, on some matters we're maybe a bit lost, but on other times I feel that we're listened to and we're supported where we can. We only pay for the services we use. In terms of administration, folks at CPark doing an excellent job there. Very mindful. Both Councillor Berger and I sit on the commission there, and I think the staff there are excellent. They're doing a fantastic job in delivering recreational services and also other simple things like an Easter egg hunt for the kids on the weekend. So they're doing a lot of work in tandem with community service groups. So I won't go on because I know others want the opportunity to speak to this, but I do feel that council should give it a go and do a review after 2 years. In terms of whether or not we could do this ourselves, I don't think we could put $2 million and make that amount available or even a proportionate amount forward. Every year I see the grants was $75,000, and that particular section of it now has been chopped down to $50,000, even though there is the other portion. That's just the way the grant program has been restructured. It's been restructured several times. I've never seen the community grant section increased. In fact, there's been comments that, well, this group has applied so many years in a row, they can't apply again, and it's open to a wide range of things. So maybe I wasn't here, I had a root canal, so I didn't make the last meeting, but $10,000 went to the RCMP musical ride. That's an arts initiative. That's, it's not, yes, it's done by the police, but it's an art, it's an event, it's a driver for our community. There's a number of things. So I'll leave it at that, and I do have a speaking order. Councillor Parkinson, then Berger, please, then Pearson and Loggins.
There was no motion.
Okay. I was right.
Through you, Your Worship, also in regards to what the CRD does, I sit on the CRD Regional Housing, and we have received funding from them for the Hope Centre and for Air Manor, where we've received our monies back. So I think that's great. I was wondering through to staff how much we actually do give out in arts grants. I hear now it's $111,000.
Through Your Worship, to Councillor
I want
Parkinson.
grants. I want grants.
We spend just over 107, I think it was, in total on grants. So not all those are arts related. There'd be others in there, like the Legion and others. So I'd have to come back to you with the exact number, but it's less than the full amount of the 107.
So I like that we give out all these grants to our community, but it would be really nice to know how much is actually for the arts, because this is a CRD Arts funding that we're looking for. So, I mean, I never thought it to be that high for the arts, so that's why I was asking. And right now, that would be it. Thank you.
Councillor Berger?
Yes, thank you. So I sort of have an off-the-cuff kind of question. I know this probably isn't really allowed, but I'm wondering if I could just do a quick poll. There's a lot of people that care about the arts in the audience, and if you could just raise your hand if you agreed with this notion. We have in our grants that are, they're broken into annual and community, but again, what I'm hearing tonight is we need to overhaul that, and I do agree. I think we need to overhaul how we do our grant process. I think it's hindersome to most of the community members. So out of that 101,937,000, would the arts community, the ones that came today, be okay with taking the 34,000 out of that and having all arts related grants then go to the CRD? If you would be,
I don't think it's appropriate to ask that
well,
question.
everyone's passionate about that here today.
Your,
so
your question,
I think my question, and I'm hearing everybody say no. So,
okay, just point of order.
Okay, sorry.
Order,
so
everyone.
I wanted
Councillor,
to get
hold for a second. Just, okay, go ahead. Your question
yes,
should
I
be
get
to
it.
council and to
get
staff.
that. I wanted to get a sense of how people felt today, and thank you for sharing that sense. The reason why I asked was I wanted to get the sense of which would go where. I guess I have no problem with entertaining this. My vote is going to be for this because it's for a 2-year trial process, and I'm okay with that. But my sense is, from reading the community arts thing, a lot of it is geared towards really big publications and, sort of larger performances or larger groups. My suggestion wasn't to cut any arts funding that's already in place. My suggestion was to still tax developers at 3%, leave I don't necessarily agree with taking money out of the SUPP program of arts. That reserve fund has $60,000 in it. I think that needs to be spent annually at $10,000 the way it already is. I still agree with taking all of those funds. I still agree with the line item for the SUPP Fine Art Society. I just wanted to know, how do we feel about going forward?
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pearson, then Loggins.
Yes, thank you. I have a few questions through the chair to our staff, to our CAO. Current balance in the SPA fund, SPA refund, is $60,348. Is that correct?
Through Your Worship, that should be pretty close. We get approximately 11 in from the building permit share, and then 10 comes out.
Yeah, 12,000. We transfer 12,000 in a year. So if I look at it, that our net we end up sort of around 62,000, 64, 66, progressing by 2,000 per year. So a technical question: if we were to support this, joining the CRD for say year 1 and year 2, we would end up with a balance. We would be taking out 42,000. So we would start with negative 30, or no, we would be at 30K next year for the opening of 2019. But that's sort of plus or minus kind of my math that's going on there. So we could probably, if we could change the wording on the bylaw, because I don't think we use that fund for much else, if I can recall going
Yeah, through your worship, it's really the banners that, I don't know what else. Recently.
Yeah, it's kind of a low draw. So I think we could probably pull this off using, if we can change the wording on that bylaw, for a 0% tax increase for 1 or 2 years, and then see how it works if we return our funding. Would that be safe to assume, if we could go back to the bylaw?
It's an option.
Okay, just a suggestion for me personally. So we could access that fund to try this out on an experimental basis or something for a couple of years. Then just a few comments, because in the presentation, and I tried to send it to our corporate officers to see if we could get it up onto the screen, but I don't know if you got my email just now, Ms. Krantz, through the chair to Ms. Krantz. Anyways, it doesn't matter. I can read some of the things off. There was 600, so the economic impact has been talked about. There's 612,971 attendees at CRD Arts funded events in 2015. It's about $8.60 that would be per household. That would be approximately invested in from our community. The support, we keep talking about grants, and the CRD, this fund is supposed to operating grants. Provides annual financial assistance to established arts organization. Project grants support emerging or established arts organization for new recurring development initiatives. Equity grants support art initiatives by applicants from communities at risk or exclusion. So that's a good one for us to be thinking about. And incubator grants accelerate the development of the arts organizations to enhance their sustainability. Well, we know that we have one of the biggest juried art shows here in Souk, so I think it would be a no-brainer that we would qualify for some sort of funding from this fund from there. So currently I read that there's, and I thought he said 11, and maybe we would be the 11th municipality out of 13 that would actually join this. So it's widely supported by Saanich, Victoria, Oak Bay, Esquimalt, View Royal, Highlands Machosen, Sydney, Solid, Saanich, and North Saanich provides an annual donation of support of the regional arts. So somebody mentioned earlier that it was Sydney, but it's actually North Saanich, and I do remember that from the presentation. So, again, I think that there's an opportunity that we can do it with little or no impact to the taxes or an increased tax, if we so choose as a council. So I think we have got a viable option in there, and I've given you a little bit of history from the actual access to the arts from the CRD service. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Loggins.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for coming out and for having us reconsider this motion. It's always good to have a healthy debate, and it's nice to see so many people at a budget meeting. Please come to more. Thursday. I am an artist. I own a business. 50% of my income is art. I'm not opposed to art. I'm not opposed to nonprofits. I run a nonprofit. Sometimes it seems to me like council has a hard time understanding that nonprofit doesn't mean that you don't make profit. It means that the profit goes back into the community, and that would definitely happen here. I'm not sold on the CRD program of the arts. I do agree that the funding model does not agree with me. I would much rather give funding directly to community arts groups. I don't like that you have to be a member to receive funding. I think it should be open. And I'm really concerned that we're not going to see that money back, or see that money plus some back into our back from the CRD grant program. So if we put $33,000 in, I want to see $50,000 at least back, and that is my biggest concern. And that's why I voted against it at the last meeting. So a couple of things. I'm open to testing it out for a couple of years. I would like to see how that goes, and I'd like to monitor it and give it a run, see if we can accomplish something from this and get a return out of our investment. To do that, we need your help. If we're going to approve this, apply for the funding, and let's get as much as we can. Sorry, I should direct my comments to council. I do not agree that the funding should come from the program of the arts account. That's just wrong. If anything, we should be adding more funding, so I'm cool with the tax increase. The other piece that I want to mention is that I am afraid that the arts groups will be ignored from the community center funding since council decided not to change it from senior and youth center line item to community center line item. And I did bring that up at the last budget meeting, that we need to make sure that community center funding is for the entire community, not just seniors and youth who also participate in arts and other things. The community center committee was a big part of, the arts community was a big part of the community center committee, and we were all adamant, the seniors, the youth, and arts and beyond, that needed to be included in that funding. So that is another concern that I want everyone to hear today. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So I'm looking for a motion. Councillor Parkinson.
So I too do not like the idea of the funding coming out of SPA. With the SPA account, we have done numerous projects. We've done the pump stations, which were all hand-painted by local artists. We do call-outs to local artists to submit their applications, and then they get an honorarium for painting. So we had the 4 pump stations done. And we always include the high school from the arts classes to participate, and they painted one. We've painted the electrical boxes in Ed McGregor Park. We've put, we do a call out for photographers to submit pictures for the hydro boxes, so they're all done. The bus shelters have all local artists' artwork on them, and the boardwalk has signs on it. So there's numerous projects that come out of the SPA committee that we have done over the years, and all the projects have been done by local Souk artists, so I'm very happy with that. I would like to see the funding come out partially out of the contingency fund, so that there's not a tax increase in that regard. And in regards to the senior and youth center, I'd just like to say, for me, senior and youth means the entire community. Everybody is all part of it. The problem was with the name change, and speaking with the community association members, they thought it was too close to their name. So if we come up with a different name, I would be more than happy to support that.
Okay, Councillor Berger.
Yes, thank you. Through you to staff, just in looking at our reserve fund balances, I just have a quick question. So every year, annually, there's $10,000 for art-related projects in our capital budget. And are those the same projects that Councillor Parks was just talking about? So all of that funding then comes from the SPA committee? And there's no other, again, sorry, through you to staff, there's no other funds? It's everything that they do every year is in that $10,000?
Yep, through your worship. So the 3% of the building permit fees goes into there. And then, yeah, any specific projects that are requested at the budget, but we always allocate 10,000 for stuff that will come out through the year, and then the rest of any arts type stuff is in the grants programs. So.
Okay, thank you. After listening to Councillor Pearson, and again, I'm working off our reserve funds. I'd make a motion that staff, that council enter the CRD Arts Development Services. And I do like the idea of it coming from the SPA fund, only because it still leaves...
You need a seconder
first.
I'm
sorry.
Okay, so the motion is that council participate in the CRD Arts Development Service with the funds coming from the SPA reserve?
Yes.
Is there a seconder?
And
second? Okay, speaking to it.
Thank you. And my follow-up is because it still will leave, so even... I've left in the $10,000 every single year. So for the first year, we'll be down to $22,000, the second year, $32,000, and then the next year, right back up. So it won't hinder any yearly projects that we've ever done, and it still leaves a balance of a minimum of $22,000 in the reserve fund. So we're still achieving our annual arts projects as well.
Okay, Councillor Pearson.
Yes, and thank you for clarifying my math that was earlier. And that was my logic behind that, was because I don't think it would hinder anything we're currently doing. And if there was any worthwhile projects, we could discuss them at the time. So I think we can do it safely from that fund if we change the wording, and we won't have changed anything that we're currently doing or plan to do. Thank you.
Councillor Parkinson.
Through your worship, how much do we have in the contingency right now, please?
Through your worship, the budget has 62,000 roughly in each of council, and it was 125, and then at the last meeting, council wanted it split equally between the operating side and the council side.
So, right. Kind of. So I want it out of the contingency fund, not my spot account.
Councillor Loggins?
I can't support the motion if it's out of the SPA account. It may seem like it doesn't hinder us short term, but it will hinder us long term. Those funds will not be available for the future. So I think we need to keep that account as is, and I will not support this motion. I will support the funding coming from another source to keep taxes down or doing a partial increase.
Okay, so I'll go to Councillor Parkinson in a second. So we have the motion. I support participating. I don't support the source of funds being the SPA funds. I think those have been allocated by a thorough bylaw. The bylaw was put in place through a thorough process, and I think deciding now, we would then have to go to that bylaw. That debate could fail, and I think that's just not the right approach there. I think perhaps the funds had not been accessed because the committee didn't exist. So, of course, it's going to sit there because the committee wasn't active. Now the committee is looking at being active, and we want to see those funds flow into the community. And that does go right into our community. Where I think it should come from is from the amounts of either, or split it. Half comes from council contingency, and half comes from what is this CAO's office operating contingency. Take it out of those two, and there is no tax increase there. And council can then direct anyone that comes forward for festival funding and the like. They can go to the CRD Arts service, and they'd be able to apply for that. So that would be my view. So I won't support the motion as it stands right now. Councillor Parkinson.
Through your worship, can we separate the two and make two motions out of it? One motion be to support the CRD, and then the second motion where the funding comes from.
Yeah, you can look to sever the two. So I'll look for a motion to sever the.
That's my motion.
Okay, that's to sever the two, and seconded by Councillor Loggins. So we'll deal with the first part, and that is that council participate in the CRD Arts Development Service. So. Further discussion, Councillor Berger.
It troubles me not knowing where the money comes from. I would like a funding source attached to it.
That's fair, actually, and I need to call the question on severing the motion first, okay? So all those in favor of severing the motion? Opposed? Councillor Berger is opposed, so the motion is severed. So I'll call the question on the first part then. That council participate in the CRD Arts Development. All those in favor of participating? Opposed? Councillor Berger is opposed, so the motion carries. So now there's only one person that opposed that. That's you.
Yeah, I just have a question.
Oh, okay. So, question. So the motion to participate has carried with one in opposition. Councillor Berger, please.
Yeah, sorry, my confusion came from I was hoping there'd be an amendment to add a funding source, so
That's where we severed. We severed so that we would do it in two parts. Okay, so the second part is the funding, and right now it is that the funding come from the SPA funds. That's the second part of that motion because we split it in half. So the first one is to participate. The second part would be that the funding be allocated from the SPA reserve. Because it's severed, okay?
I was looking for a friendly amendment.
So well, we can, it's getting complicated. Okay, so we have this motion of where the funding should come from. So I'll call the question on this as the funding source. All those in favor? Councillor Pearson and Berger are in favor. All those opposed? Councillor Loggins, Councillor Parkinson, myself opposed. So that motion fails. So I'm looking for a follow-up motion. Councillor Parkinson.
I would move that the funding be allocated from the two contingency funds, one from council and one from CAO.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Loggins. So this would be a 50-50 split from those two funds. Councillor Loggins on the motion, then Pearson.
And I realized, and this is sort of, we didn't talk too much about the first motion, and it probably should have gone into that one instead of this one, but I'm wondering about the length of time, because we all currently, tonight, had discussed having a 2-year period where that would occur. So I just want to be sure that this would be regarding a 2-year.
You would need to make a motion, because then it would be up to the next council to decide to take a look at it. I mean, they would go through this budget cycle and a whole new 5-year plan, just as we are. And it would be staff reporting out and councillors looking back at minutes, depending on the composition per se.
Right, and I'm sure that would probably happen naturally as well, but perhaps that's something that I can bring back later, that we have a report from the CRD on what Souk has received or something like that at a later time. Yeah.
Yeah, there would also be a member of council appointed to this every year. So just like our others would be the person that would liaise and report back. So I would expect that councillor would then say, you know what, this is working so well, or I disagree with this, maybe we need to opt out. So that could come.
Yep, no, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. So on Councillor Pearson, on the funding source.
No, I'm fine with the funding source as long as there's not, as long as what we're trying to accomplish, and I think around the table I've heard, is that we're trying to do it from current funding sources that won't mean a tax increase, and that we can look at it every year. Then we can actually measure the success of this participation or not. So the measurement will be the return, and I'm largely happy as long as we can, and through the chair to our CAO, that we have enough room in all of those contingency funds, I take it.
Yeah, through your worship, we do right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously the motion is failed, but when we're looking at the timing of year and when there's funding applications, grant funding, we're joining something in almost May. We're talking about a funding thing, so it just seems to me that we're spinning our wheels, but okay, I'll support it.
Councillor Berger, another, okay, we're good. Okay, so I'm going to call the question then on the funding, that the funding be split between the council and CAO contingency funding. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, council, for that robust debate. And all of the groups that came out, you do incredible work in our community that we really appreciate every day. But please don't leave. We still have a budget to get through. And I think it's important that you stay with us. It's nice company. Okay, so I would like to turn over to Mr. Blackhall, to our CAO, to just let us know where we're at with the budget, please. And the page number as well, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So on the screen I have the consolidated page of the budget, and this hang on a second here, this doesn't look like the...
Actually, Mr. Blackhall,
yes.
If you could just pause for a second. Folks, if I was kidding about you wanting to stay, maybe like if you are interested in leaving, like maybe we'll take this as an opportunity just to clear the room so that you're not trying to exit while Mr. Blackhall is speaking. Okay, thank you, everyone. Go ahead, Mr. Blackhall. If you could just let us know which the page number. Page 27.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just making sure we have the version that everyone has in their package here. So.
Is that page?
Okay, I think we're ready.
Sorry, Mr. Blackhall. Could I please have a copy of the print version? I realize I left my iPad at home. I know. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Blackhall.
Okay, so this meeting really is just to finish up on the capital budget that we didn't really get all the way through. We have already gone through all of the operating budgets for all the departments. But I'll just a quick overview again. This is the bylaw based on where it sits right now with the changes from the other evening. And what we just discussed tonight won't have an impact because it's come out of contingency funds. So this would be the draft bylaw. If there wasn't any changes from the rest of the discussion tonight, this would be a bylaw that we would be bringing forward for first and second reading on Thursday evening. The next page in the package is basically a snapshot of the whole rest of the document on one page. And you can see, based on the impact of the discussions from the other evening, where it was that the rate is now 2.76% instead of 2.55. And down below in the expenditures section, you can see the major areas that tie in. All this stuff ties back into the bylaw, so you can easily follow from the bylaw number back into here and then back into the document. But you'll see, for example, on the expenditure side, we have a line in the bylaw that says total debt servicing. We have a line for total capital, transfers to reserves, and then our other municipal purposes, which is basically all the operating budgets. Tonight, we were really going to focus back on the capital, this 4.6 million number, right? Sorry, that didn't work. Right here. And you can see that this next column over is showing the impact of how much of all these things are being funded by property taxes. Okay. As mentioned, there's also a document on our website in the finance department section that provides a breakdown. If you just punch in your assessed value, it will calculate the taxes by each sort of service line area, and it will give you also an explanation of what goes on in those service lines and what would the impact be if we spent more or spent less, et cetera. So you can see for capital, we are spending approximately 264 of the 4.6 million. 264,000 is coming from property taxes. And if we go back to the capital budget page itself, this page here, page 10 of 33, shows you the overall general government capital, so not including the sewer fund. This is all the sources of the funding up top, the different reserve funds. And then you can see other, so if we're going to get any grants, if we're going to borrow, if we need to transfer from surplus, and then how much is being funded by property tax. So again, 264,000 of the total is being recovered from property taxes. The difference between the 3 million and the 4.6 on the other pages of the sewer fund. So I just wanted for council to get a chance again to go through this page 11 of 33, which is the 2018 capital plan. We did already go over the fire department area, the engineering area, the community projects areas, and the parks department, which is just equipment. But pardon me, and sewer. Sorry, but we didn't. I wasn't 100% comfortable that council had decided whether to take any out or add any back in. The ones we hadn't talked about yet were the ones up top. The spa reserve is the first one. Then the general government, so that's it's mainly our ongoing type IT expenditures that we have. A new one this year that was in the budget already, though, for last year is the phone system is way past its life and needs to be updated. And then the other expenses for the general buildings that we have, the main thing being the HVAC units, the ones that are just not functioning at all need to be replaced. We need to do a full building condition assessment. Plumbing, the sprinklers, the fire chief would tell you all about this, but we've always been sort of having this money in the budget to address this issue of if we open up the walls to start to fix the sprinkler issues that we need to do, we're going to run into some plumbing issues for sure. So we've got that allocated in there. Just furniture and equipment that we always have. This accessibility assessment and the lift modification is the elevator or the lift in this room. We had the Rick Hansen Foundation come out and do an assessment for us already, and now we're just waiting for the results of that to see where that money is best spent, and then we'll be able to access their grant program for that. And then the other renovations that we have to do in the building, still we are adding more staff, of course, and that creates a need to open up some space. And that's it in the top part. The rest we've already discussed: fire department, engineering, and community projects, and parks and sewer. So I just wanted council to have a look at that again, and just let staff know if you're happy with all the amounts of the line items.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Blackhall, for bringing us back to this. I think it's very important. Looks fine. I'll turn to councillors for on any of those items on page 7. If you want anything that Mr. Blackhall related spoke of today, and as well as some from the reports that we received previously. So just anything on that page. So we'll go with Councillor Parkinson, Pearson, Loggins, and then Berger, in that order, please.
Through your worship, my two questions now are in regards to the electric car charging station for the 80,000. Was that for more than one charging station, or was it for the supercharger?
Your
Mr.
worship,
Howard?
through to Councillor Parkinson.
I know.
At the last council meeting, council resolved for us to come back for staff. To come back with a report and identify municipal properties for the individual car charging stations, not the high-powered one, but the regular ones. We have a report that will be coming back, hopefully, at the next council meeting.
Thank you.
And to clarify, those are funds that's not in this budget because it's in last year's funds, so they're being held for that?
That's correct.
Okay, that's why it's not showing up here. But it was to look at not the supercharger, but a step down in multiple locations.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this
follow you to second question.
Second question is the John Phillips washroom for the 100,000.
So on that one, we put the 100,000 in as a placeholder to get a report back and to look at washroom options. So were we going to look at one model, just knowing the concerns of the one that is at McGregor, or to consider a few of the pit style so that's another report that's going to come. So we allocated 100,000. It's still just as under that name there was a placeholder. Right. Okay.
So that means that we may not spend that amount of money, though, right?
That's correct. We might spend less in this park, or none at all, or maybe get a few around town.
Thank you.
Okay. But there'll be another report coming on that. Councillor Pearson is next.
Yes, thank you. I had the question on the assessment, building assessment. In the building section, we have an assessment, building condition assessment, 50K. So what is a building assessment?
Through your worship, that's really just an analysis of this building, like you would do if a strata, depreciation report, that type of report. We need an independent one done instead of us just sort of guessing what needs to be done and how much it would cost, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done in here, and then we have to decide whether we do it, if the money's best spent looking at other means.
Okay. So is that a contracted out service then that we're talking about, that we'd pay somebody $50,000 to assess our building? Seems like an awful lot of money to me, to look at our building.
Your worship, through Councillor Person, sorry, I did it again. We would put an RFQ out for that service. I don't imagine we would spend that much money, but again, like some of the other estimates within the capital program, we know that's a little bit high. We need to come back to you when we get an RFQ. We don't expect it to be quite that high, but we had to put a marker on it.
Okay.
And that will come back to council in a report form.
Yeah, and I get it, it's just at the budget stage, it just seemed like it's, $50K seems like an awful lot of money just to look at our building. So, the other thing is that the $200K that we keep talking about, and I think it's kind of bounced over a few years through the chair to the CAO, that $200K for the plumbing, that's in anticipation of a complete revamp of our entire fire suppression system or something? So.
Through your worship, I think the fire chief could answer this a lot better than I could. So.
Through your worship to Councillor Pearson. Last year's budget had $150K in it for the revamp of the fire suppression system here in this building. I did some investigative work on what it would cost to get support to have an RFQ done and built for us by a consulting company. That's where the estimate of about $50K came into play. We expect that the cost just to deal with the sprinkler system itself will be between $150 to $200K. The building assessment would confirm that with a full consultant's report.
But just to touch a bit more on the plumbing, what plumbing do you anticipate or feel me or sense is the issue?
Your worship, to elaborate a little more, there'd be more plumbing work that would be expected to be done because of the non-compliance of this sprinkler system. It has to do with how it's connected through everything to sprinkler heads that aren't functioning properly, to breaching of walls, and to getting the system in full compliance.
Would that also, sorry, Councillor, go ahead. I'm just wondering if that would include like backflow preventer devices, or are they currently on the sprinkler system?
Your worship, there is some current backflow preventative devices in the actual sprinkler room. From what I understand, reports that were done before my time showed that this sprinkler system is in non-compliance and will not function properly if in case of an emergency, and it has failed in a couple instances where it has leaked into the station.
Go ahead, Councillor Pearson. Sorry for interrupting.
And thank you for those answers, Chief, but I asked these questions to someone in the history, not you. So if we're in non-compliance, what's the penalty for being in non-compliance? And we have a large group of people, not super large tonight, but is there restrictions around occupancy and all of these things if we're in non-compliance? Because, we're in a public occupied building. So I hear the word non-compliance. What's our risk associated with being in non-compliance, and what's the statute for moving that forward? There must be some kind of requirement to say, if you're non-compliance, you have to have it fixed within 30 days, 60 days, 100 days or something. I know the fire department's not so nice to me in my building in Victoria if I'm in non-compliance, and that's around alarm panels. So.
Through your worship to Councillor Pearson, from what I understand, prior to my time here, there was an order to WorkSafe that advised that through the fire department that we are in non-compliance. So the risk to the organization would be in the event that we actually had something significant here and there was loss, and the fire suppression system failed at doing its duty to suppress a fire. Heaven forbid we are a fire department here as well. If we can't suppress an incident here, the consequences likely would be the insurance claims would be denied.
So I guess that gets fast forward. How, through the chair, what's our immediate plan? Because it sounds imminent to me. So thank you.
Through your worship to Councillor Pearson, the immediate plan with the budget that we had last year was to begin investigating the amount of effort and that we had adequate budget to do the repairs. Bringing in a consultant to fully assess the impact of beyond what is going to happen with just the sprinkler system. Modifications to the building, modifications to the plumbing system, modifications to any other parts of the building that could impact the foundation, etc., would all be assessed as part of a larger project. So we're attempting to save money on not just piecemealing a sprinkler system and then uncovering some other issues along the way.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Councillor. Are you finished for now?
Well, I guess my bigger question is that when we have a public occupancy building, and this building was built in recent memory, we have many other buildings with public occupancy that I'm sure are not at code in Souk. And I'm not sure that they all have code requirements. They may be in non-compliance as well. So I guess is it something that we'd like to do, or is it something that we have to do? Because if I look at the community hall that was built around the turn of the century, I'm sure that their plumbing issues and fire issues are probably similar to ours, because it can hold a lot more people than we have. So I guess I'm asking is this something that we have to do, or is it something that we should do?
So, Your Worship, to Councillor Pearson, this is something we have to do since we do have a sprinkler system in here that's supposed to be functioning, and it isn't functioning. So being in non-compliance for WorkSafe, they could come and investigate further and give us an order to actually have it remedied within a certain time frame. I know they're aware of it because they do have it on file, and that's why we have it in the budget, because we do need to repair this and we shouldn't be letting it slide any longer.
Through the chair. Thank you.
Okay. You may recall last year there were some plumbing issues that led into mold being found in a few areas of the downstairs. So from a workers' health perspective, it had to be remediated. So that's sort of an example of a piecemeal approach to dealing, but it had to be done. Just it was mold that was found in ceilings in 2 areas. Councillor Loggins?
Thank you. I feel like that's a tough one to... That was a kind of a downer. Got to bring it upward. But good question, Councillor Pearson. I just wanted to ask Council if there was an appetite to look at changing the name of the Seniors Youth Centre Fund, and also if we can eventually consider thinking of working beyond like 2019 and beyond and including additional funding in future years. I'm not going to make that a motion or anything tonight, but just something that we can think of, because I know the fund ends, or we stopped putting funding into it in 2018. And after working with the community center committee, it became evident, and I think in the report that you received, there were like 10,000 recommendations on things that could be done. So clearly there's a need for us to invest a lot in this area. So it would be nice to see that fund as a bit more ongoing. And we do have a good pot in it now, but I know that Councillor Parkinson just mentioned she was open to something, but I wanted to kind of see if there were other options, because it did start as seniors and youth, but I think it's become so much more than that, and it would be nice to just have that fund available in a bit more open sense. So I was thinking even community facilities, we could even add on to it and just say seniors, youth, and community, anything else. But are we allowed to pass notes here?
So one thought, Councillor Loggins, is that is to consider what Councillor Parkinson just passed you, but also that we would have to go. It's a bylaw, I think, that was enacted that set this up. So even if council had passed this, then the whole bylaw needs to be revisited. So it's a bit of a larger discussion. So an option would be to get into contact maybe with our corporate officer just on the bylaw, perhaps put a notice of motion forward to look at examining the bylaw and also extending what the funding length is, and perhaps a name, and then looking if there's any more now that needs to be added to it, because it was 5 years ago. And the committee didn't exist at that time, but now given that there's been recommendations that have come forward, it would be timely to perhaps look at refreshing that. So that would just be my advice on a different way, and then it could come forward that way, and then it would then flow into the budget for next year.
Right, and that's fine. I was told to bring it up during the budget process, so it's kind of frustrating to hear that, but at the same point,
but that's just
it would be nice to be able to have that all-encompassing discussion where we can start looking at extending it beyond 2018, because I think that will be necessary.
Yeah, because I think that's where we would, even if it passed, we'd have to go to the bylaw anyway. So this way, I think you can just drive the bylaw out and have that brought forward and refreshed.
Okay, I can put through a notice of motion. Thanks.
Great, okay. Councillor Berger, please.
Yes, thank you. Just going through I have a few comments, so I'm just going to start at the top block. Where's my first question is on, actually just a comment. In the building department, we just talked about the sprinklers, and I believe since my very first year on council, we've been talking about that. So I think that this building, ever since it's been built, has been non-compliant. So I'm happy to see that it's actually in the budget and hope that we can achieve fixing that. With the fire department, as I expressed last time, I'm really glad that we've started the process of asset management. However, I'd like to see costing for repairs, recertification, or refurbishment. Looking at our 5-year financial plan, we're going to deplete the fire reserve fund in 2020 and then again in 2022. So the chief told us at his presentation that there's a number of vehicles that are lacking safety features, and I'd like to see some costings for repair rather than just replacement. The 5-year plan shows replacement of all the vehicles, and I would like to see if there's what the cost would be. Like I said, I did a little bit of homework last time on it, and there is a company on island that can do refurbishment and recertification, so I would like to see what those costs would look like. Going into engineering, I'm just wondering if we can look at some text amendments, and it's not any bylaws or anything huge. For similar question to what Councillor Parkinson talked about when she questioned the EV charging station, because we still have it listed as a station, it would be nice if we can change that to EV charging stations so it would be more clear to the public. And then the same thing with the John Phillips bathroom. It looks like we're spending $100,000 on that, so if we could change that wording to community washrooms so it doesn't look like we're doing all of that in one building. And that's about it. Thank you.
I'll just turn to the fire chief. Do you have any comments on Councillor Berger's comments regarding the fire apparatus and such?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Berger. I've done some research as well on refurbishment and repair. From what I understand with the fire underwriter survey is that if you begin to do refurbishment of apparatus, yes, you can extend the life of it, and it's typically just for the reserve and second line units. So your first line units have a 15-year age regardless, and if you're attempting to extend something from 15 to 16 years of a first line unit, that's something that is not clear that the fire underwriters would support. There's quite a bit of documentation with the underwriter survey when it comes to extending, for example, an engine to a 21st year, 22nd year and beyond. It involves a lot further pump testing and other kind of testing criteria as well. That's something that we can definitely look at, beyond the 5-year plan as units are coming into their maximum life, if we can extend the reserve unit or a second line unit. But for the ones that we have in the budget right now, we're really attempted to showcase the health and well-being of our current fleet. And that presentation was showing the best method of trying to stagger the apparatus replacement so it's not all coming as a hit in 1 year. The other thing we're looking at too here is if we're deferring units, the Canadian dollar is not in our favor right now. And it's highly likely that as we move into further years down the road that some of these estimates will have to be adjusted before procurement due to the Canadian dollar becoming weaker at the moment.
Thank you, Chief. And just touching on Councillor Berger's comments, does Council have any issues with the name changes to electric car charging stations and or instead of JPMP bathroom just to put community washrooms? That works? Okay. If we could make those changes. To our CAO, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. And yeah, we'll make those changes for the next version you'll see on Thursday. To go to the fire chief's comments, we also were going to have the fire underwriters look at our apparatus plan. So I think that'll give some comfort as to what can be done regarding any possible repair and refurbishment. So we will, I'd ask the fire chief to just provide a brief comment on that as well.
Some of the research I've done with the fire underwriter survey is already made contact with one of the field technicians, and this technician advised that the no cost for them to come in and take a look at a full underwriter's assessment of our fire department will include going through our apparatus replacement plan, our current fleet, our current staffing, our fire prevention programs, water supply, our recent accreditation of Superior Tanker, shuttle service, and of course our mutual aid agreements and our volunteer training program and officer development, etc. So all these things will be done. We've made contact with them already, and our goal is to have a report early next year to showcase what the findings are and reinforce any changes that need to be made.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments from members of council on the budget page? Okay, so it looks fine. I'd like to invite any members of the public, if there's any comments on the discussion that we had today on these capital items in particular, and or if there are any items maybe from a previous operating discussion that we had last week. If you come forward, sir, if we could just have your name and address, of course, and then there'll be 2 minutes on the timer for you. Thank you.
Kenneb's Canavan, 6220 Calvert Road, Souk. Just a comment through the chair, your mayor, is that the article that Chief Mount brought up in respect to the sprinkler system being defaulty and whether or not you're liable, the question is yes, you are very liable. And because the statute of limitations is run out on it when it took place, you could be therefore in fault. But I believe with through the chair, Madam Mayor, to Chief Mount, that he's recognized the shortcomings, and so they're doing something about it. So you would be relieved a little bit that way. But most of the fire departments, when you respond to a public building, such as say downtown Victoria, Saanich, any of those buildings, you're given 30 days and sometimes 2 weeks to come up with the results. And if you don't start right away, you're subject to fines right away. So they take it very, very serious. Okay, I dealt with that in my career in the fire department, and you're totally right. The liability is very, very strong. So strong that by going, just as an example, Madam Mayor, to go to an apartment, say Air Manor, and the alarm system's down, the officer responding there would write up an order. You have your order book, and you'd write up the order. They have to provide a watch every hour on every floor at their own expense due to the fact that the system's down. So it's very, very important, okay, that, and this has been going on for a long time. So Chief Mounts, through the chair to the chief, great, he's acted on it, and that's good. Because once you've taken action on it, you're relieved a little bit, even though it's gone so long. I would, through the chair, Madam Mayor, to the CAO. I never know whether to call Brent the CAO, Finance, Mr. Blackwell. He's a man of many boots and hats.
You can call him either the CAO or Mr. Blackwell.
Yeah, maybe after the report I'll be calling him something else. I don't know. But anyways, on the line for salaries in 2018, 2019, 2020, I see no reference to overtime. And this was mentioned before. Could I ask Mr. Blackwell where overtime sits in the budget for firefighter salaries?
Okay, so that's, I believe, probably under the
It's on page 19.
19, okay. Mr. Blackwell, if you could, are you able to respond to Mr. Evskanavan, please?
Yes, Your Worship. Sorry, I'm just trying to find that page. But the fire department operating budget pages are in the community services. Here we go, community safety. And how do I make this smaller here? Hang on a sec here. Just want to make that smaller. There we go. So page 23.
On page 19?
Yeah, 19 in the middle there, 23 on the bottom corner. So the salaries line within the administration part of the fire department is just that. It's salaries. We do not budget for overtime per se. It comes up as we discussed the other evening. There used to be a separate line that was in there for the shifts. That was what was taken out because after we renegotiated the IAFF agreement, that line was no longer necessary. But there's always going to be overtime. The wastewater department budgets for it separately, and we could have every department budgeting for it separately. There generally ends up being room in the salaries budgets, but there is always a risk there that there's going to be overtime, and it will have to be funded by surplus instead of taxes.
Does that answer?
Thank you.
Okay.
I agree with Mr. Blackwell totally. That is right, and that's in my take on it. In 2017, it worked out to approximately 14% was paid in overtime over and above the salaries. So there's when the contract was signed by the Fire Department Union 4841, they've addressed some of that overtime, I believe, through, this would be through, to the chief, Madam Mayor. They've addressed that with a letter, I believe, and that it's going to be reduced. Would that be correct?
I think it has to do because the IAFF, the International Association of Firefighters contract that covers off our department, a new agreement was signed last year, but I'll let the chief speak a bit more about that, and that's the change. So it's
if I might just carry on,
okay.
and then we can get him to come into it. But the overtime doesn't show it there, so the salary would be approximately 13.5, 13.7% more than what it shows right now, because the line used to show it there, it doesn't show it anymore. So the reason I'm speaking about this, I think that I've gone along with the budget that way it is right now, with 6 firefighters, the way that it is counting the chief as 6. But in my estimation, it's not enough. We should have 2 more. And the reason we should have 2 more is to put us into that magic number of 8, that we can control our own destiny with overtime, and we'll get some relaxation from the others because the overtime won't be there. And when we were working on the Fire Commission and afterwards, we drew up all the figures in that, and I can back up everything I'm saying, that we can show that we can provide 8 firefighters paid for the same amount of money that we're going to be budgeting for here, which will get to the playbook that we need for the building department. That's going to affect our plans and everything. That's so important for us. And the fire department is a very important thing. Our response times to all emergencies, approximately 75 to 85% of the time, would be able to maintain that. And in the budget, when we look down to volunteer duty firefighters, it's the first response duty remuneration, the relief worker wages, volunteer performance, and it goes on and on and on. That with the utilization of the volunteers a little bit more, the money's already there for them, and there's a formula that's put in place that in the event of, say, a firefighter being off on holidays, that in the event that we need to fill that spot, before we used to take the volunteer in, and he would go and stand in for the firefighter for, say, 1 week or 2 weeks, and he would be paid a reduced rate. And that is covered in the volunteer firefighters. And we've gotten away from that over the last few years, and then we've gotten into this heavy overtime that we're faced with right now. But the budget's laid out for the year 2018, 19, 20, 21, and 22, and I believe that we could supply 8 firefighters, with it is right now, on duty, and we could eliminate almost all our overtime, plus we would start to maintain our standards and meet our standards. For the playbook, that's so important. It goes on and on and on, that we talk about this time and time again. Our response on first responder calls. What are we going to do with it? In Saanich, where I worked and for 32 and a half years, we had first responder back in the day that I started, and we still do. We took the notion that the taxpayer pays our wages, and we're going to send a truck, respond to that particular call. You're in duty all the time. So if a truck with 4 people on it shows up at your house, and we've done it many times, such as in the Gordon Head area, when I worked at the University of Victoria, heart attack. If need be, we would leave one of the fellows right there giving CPR, and somebody else helping them, and we would respond from there. So you're always in service. Same as if you take a truck out on inspections in the afternoon, and you're doing public inspections, you're in the community eye, and you get a call, you just respond. But due to the lack of manpower they have right now, sometimes they're not being able to do that. If we brought all these men in, these extra 2 men, and in light of that extra 2 men, they'd be able to do that. And to go to what Councillor Berger said easier, is that one of the firefighters should be a mechanic firefighter.
Sorry, Mr. Canavan, I'm getting the eye that I've let you go way over time.
I know, but I'm not finished yet.
I know. Can I just...
I heard everybody talk about the grant for the parks. This is just as important, if not more important.
No, and I completely
This is one of our
appreciate
most
that.
important things in municipality that we're talking about right now. And I would request just a few more minutes.
Sorry, we just need a vote.
Okay, we
Pardon me?
just need to have a vote to extend your speaking time.
Okay,
That's
I would ask for that.
Okay, can I ask, Councillor Parkinson has asked to extend the speaking time, and it's seconded by Councillor Pearson. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you for drawing me back.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. One of the firefighters, I believe, should be a mechanic firefighter. All the fire departments in town have their own mechanic firefighter, and most of them have two that are there. You have that firefighter's on duty all the time. It takes care of a lot of the nitpicky stuff. It's done with all the time. Your equipment stays in great shape. He's a firefighter, and he's a qualified mechanic, and it's just a bonus for the fire department. It really is. And there's lots of qualified people. Normally, what you do is you get somebody that's a little bit older, around 32, 33, that's had the experience. So, and you get a really quality guy, becomes a good firefighter, and he's there for your equipment all the time, to save you having to take it out. And if you go to page 20, and you look at on page 20, for the, I always go backwards on these pages, excuse me. On page 20, we get down to the vehicle maintenance and operations, operation and maintenance, and the mechanic basically takes care of all of that for you. He looks after your air packs. He's qualified for it, and normally what they do in the larger departments, and this department is an important department in the area that it is, because it's the only professional department in an area that you can only get to in one way. And the other departments out here, Otter Point, all the other departments are relying on the expertise of this department. And we supply mutual aid to them, and rightfully so. And they supply mutual aid to us. And sometimes you can't use the individual that they're giving you, but nevertheless, it's the thought that goes into it, and that's what it's all about. And so I'm urging council to think about what I brought up here tonight. It's very important. I have the documents to be able to show the chief if he so wishes it, and that we could, at the end of the year, we could have 8 firefighters, and it's going to eliminate so many of our problems that we've been dealt with over the last 3 years, and huge problems. I thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Canavan. I appreciate your perspective immensely, in addition to clarifying that piece on the sprinkler system. And I would like to follow up and schedule a meeting with you just to discuss it in greater length, if you're open to that. Would that be amenable with you, sir? Excuse me? I'll be in touch to schedule a meeting with you, so perhaps we can just discuss it in length if you're okay with it. Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Welcome, Mr. McIntyre. I'm back. I know. There's no coffee here either, but thank you for sticking through all the budget meetings.
That's crazy that was even brought up. Anyways, Cam McIntyre, 2012 Penang, fire, police background. A couple of issues or questions. The full, through you, Madam Mayor, to the chief or to Mr. Blackhall, a full-time firefighter doing or assigned to the duty officer role, where would his pay come from?
I can answer that question through your worship to the member of the public. That would be coming out of the duty officer remuneration, but the pay that they get out of that is not a typical IFF wage. It's consistent through any type of duty officer that's on that type of shift. Besides myself, I don't get paid for those shifts.
Okay.
You do get paid, though.
Well, he does get a salary, yes. He's not a volunteer.
So you have full-time firefighters, IAFF members, pulling out of a earmarked volunteer firefighter budgetary item. Is that correct?
Through your worship to the member of the public, yeah, that's just the way it's structured in this budget, that those members are remunerated through that line item.
So in actuality then, when I look at this budget and it earmarks this section for volunteer firefighter, Madam Mayor, through you to Finance Director, the section marked volunteer firefighters, that isn't actually the case.
So, Mr. Blackhall, do we need to look at changing that?
Through your worship, yeah, we can split it, maybe, so it's up in the, as part of the salaries, the shifts that are, we don't have enough volunteers to take them all, so it can be easily split up in the fire department admin and with the volunteer firefighters.
Okay, that might clarify.
Well, the issue, of course, is you as elected officials would certainly have a vested interest in knowing where the money that you've budgeted for is being spent.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen a number of examples, not solely isolated to the fire department, where monies are truly unaccounted for. And I'm quite astonished, to put it nicely. So one more question, or I guess comment, Madam Mayor. After the truck proposal put forward by the fire chief, I took the time, because I found it quite interesting to learn that perhaps some of the trucks were difficult to drive. So I did phone Freightliner Trucks, and they're just in Portland, Oregon, and questioned their manufacturing abilities and whether they produced a truck that was difficult to drive. They assured me that was not the case. I asked them about parts availability for truck repair and the like, and they said in almost every instance they're able to supply the part, and if in fact the part is not available, they could make recommendations where the part could be manufactured, which is commonplace in the industry. If it's a difficult part to find, you just get it made. It's far cheaper than going out and spending $1 million or whatever dollars on a new truck. And again, it all comes down to fiscal accountability. And in closing, I'm astonished that there's quite a vast array of finances that go unaccounted for. And I'm not saying in each and every instance everyone is part of that, but some of you seem to pay attention, some of you don't seem to pay attention, and it's shocking from where I come from. But the trucks, they can be repaired. The accounting, I think, needs to be tightened up. And that's all I have to say tonight.
Okay, so I will say that in terms of accounting being tightened up, that Mr. Blackhall and his department is audited every year by an independent auditor. They're on site right now, and they go through everything. Council has requested additional information, budget to actual reports, which we're receiving, and more information so that we can get more clarity. We've made some changes to the purchasing policy, more different reports coming in. So under Mr. Blackhall's leadership, we're already seeing that in short order. We appreciate that. And our auditor does come in. He comes in, or I shouldn't say he, they come in twice a year, my understanding is, where they do a preliminary review. Anything that they see untowards, they would raise it to my attention. I haven't received that so far, but we would get a more fulsome report when they're done, which is usually around May, is it, I think? So, yeah. So anyway, I think everyone here is just as concerned as you are, so that's where we've made some requests for that.
I hear that, just in the simple hiring of the last 2 firefighters.
Your microphone isn't on.
Council approved 1 firefighter, and then there was 2 hired.
We approved the hiring of 2, and we were just not aware that both were been hired at the same time in the funding. So that had been addressed. The chief, as soon as it came to our attention, we asked the chief to bring forward a report, which he did. And so we're working on these things. But I truly appreciate where you come from. I think we all do. We're trying to get there.
You will. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Blackhall?
Thank you. Just to follow up to on the discussion about the number of firefighters, this budget does include another firefighter as well, so that would bring it up to 7. So that is already in the budget. Not for the full amount of this year, but you can see, I think you can see the impact of how that is. But the chief can speak to that if he needs to, but just wanted people to know that's in there. So.
Thank you for that. And maybe does the chief have anything? Sure, go ahead, chief.
Thank you, Your Worship. To the members of the public, yes, I was going to comment, as the CAO did, that we do have a plan to have an additional firefighter come in this year, and also to have more support myself with a deputy chief officer over the next year. Also, to address the overtime issues, we don't see the shifts in there anymore, really because during the negotiation process, there was a significant move to make sure that was addressed. And we're seeing results in that now, as the members are mentioning to me. It's a significant decrease, upwards to 80 to 90% of the amount of overtime that they were doing in the past couple of years. And they don't want to do this overtime anymore, because I came in and experienced 3 firefighters that are really exhausted. And the 2 members that are in helping now is taking some pressure off that. And we've done some significant rescheduling of meetings to eliminate any scheduled overtime. So the only overtime we've been incurring right now is for significant emergencies that are aligned with an operating guideline that shows the proper type of callbacks and the types of emergencies where they're needed to come back to.
Like a tsunami, perhaps?
That is correct.
Right, or non-one. Okay. Thank you very much for that clarity. Other members of the public have any comments or questions on items presented in the capital report that was highlighted today, or any other areas of the budget? I'd just like to thank Mr. McIntyre for keeping us company through every budget meeting that we've had. You've attended one more than me. We appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
At least I turned it on this time. Mark Jarvis, 2349 French Road. And I guess I just wanted some clarification on the Murray Road staircase. That was kind of a little bit of a confusing issue for me when I caught the council meeting where it was originally approved but not approved. It wasn't let out for tender, then it was. And people started working on it, and then they were told to stop because it hadn't gone out to tender. So I see now that it's been approved for, coincidentally, the same amount of money. And it was only one bid that was received, and it was from a Vancouver company. And it was like $75,000 for a stairway. Not being in the stairway business, I don't know if that's a lot of money. I don't know if exactly where I'm going with that, but maybe you get my drift. I just wondered what the entire process was on that. And they were talking about recouping $19,000 of the money that was already spent. I think Councillor Casper addressed that. So my question is not why does it cost that much money, but why wasn't there any local contractors that bid on it? And that's where I'm going with this. The other one is like this is sort of two-part, and they're not related, but they're related to the ability to spend my money. And I was a little bit entertained and a little bit sad at the same time how the fire department could request a new vehicle, and one of them only had 28,000 kilometers on it. And the other one was the issue of availability of parts from Freightliner not going back more than 10 years. I don't buy that. You know, where I work, my boss was cheap. We had a truck that was 20 years old. It was an International. It still ran fine. So I know maybe fire department miles are like dog years. Maybe it just goes along. But I always think, like, when people make comments that the pickup truck's no good because the motor's no good because the transmission's no good, and there's a garage down the road that could throw a motor and transmission in a Chevrolet probably with their eyes closed. So, there you go. You can take that whichever way you want. Thank
you very much, Mr. Jarvis. Does the Chief like to add to that or respond?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just to comment to the member of public. It does look strange at times when we have low mileage on fire apparatus, but quite often on the exterior of a unit, it may not look that there is significant wear and tear. But when we put 15 to 20 years on an apparatus that has had significant pump hours running at a scene and sitting there and idling behind the actual skin, we can have some significant problems where they begin to not pass the annual pump tests, etc. So that's when we start looking at an open and honest review of the actual health and well-being of the apparatus. And we're always, trying to make sure we're maintaining vehicles properly so they're suiting the needs of the community and functioning properly as an emergency vehicle.
Thank you, Chief. And just in regards to the Murray Road staircase, Council had concerns with process and with resolutions and how they were carried out. And that's why the matter was brought forward and retendered. That was all done in an open meeting here. And yes, and it is now being worked on, and the bids go out on BC Bid, and they get, they're on the website, they're posted, so I don't know, I can't answer why no one locally bid on it. We got a bid, and they're getting repaired finally, so, learn from the experience, because we do have other staircases within the community that need to be remediated and other public works areas that need to be resolved and dealt with. So it's something that just work through and work out. But I think as you sort of stated your concerns, I can appreciate where the confusion lies, and just leave it that we didn't feel that the due process had occurred, and we wanted to make sure that it was followed to our content. Okay, other members of the public on tonight's, on anything on the budget? Anything from council? So at this point then, there's some minor shifts or some text changes, the CRD Arts, so staff is going to work out on all of that, and then we'll put together a final draft that we will receive on Thursday, as well as the first and second reading of the bylaw. So if there are anything that you would like additional clarity on, feel free to contact Mr. Blackhall or bring it forward on Thursday, and we'll get through that. And then on Monday, it goes, this coming Monday at regular council meeting would be the public input on the budget, as I understand it. Can I just get clarity from Mr. Blackhall? Monday is like we do first and second reading on Thursday, and if I assume that both of those carry, then on Monday there's a public input session for the budget specifically.
That's correct, Your Worship. So this Thursday would be a short special meeting just to give readings, first and second readings to the bylaw. And then third reading would be on the 9th.
May want to not say short. Just saying. But yes, and then we'll complete that along with some of our other items within the regular meeting, and then look to adoption and carry on from there. Okay? So just confirming, we are down a few councillors, but as far as everyone here knows, Thursday is good? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'll call for a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Loggins. All those in favor of adjournment? Opposed? Motion's carried.